Welcome to today's Iris session, brought to you by BrightRock, provider of the first ever life insurance that changes as your life changes. I'm David O'Sullivan, and today we're here to talk about life as a freelancer. Now, it takes a fair amount of courage and self-discipline to work for yourself, especially if your job has an unpredictable workload and income. So how do successful freelancers generate sustainable incomes? And what keeps them going during tough times? Joining me in the studio, Brendan Jack and Kirsten Kairuz, and streaming in is Ishay Govender-Ypma. Brendan is a film and TV writer, producer, director, actor and comedian, and no doubt I've left off a whole lot of elements to his career. Kirsten is a director of the Graft Yard, a new working space for entrepreneurs, startups, consultants, and importantly for this conversation, for freelancers. And Ishay is a freelance travel and food journalist who abandoned a career in law in pursuit of cultural immersion and air miles. And that sounds like a good way to do it. So to my studio guests, welcome to both of you, Brendan and Kirsten. But Brendan, for you, when you have to write down in that block occupation, what do you write?
It's always a tough one because I've been asked it 100 times and I still don't have a concise answer, and I'm always just have to take 10 minutes to fill it out. But generally I just go down to, I kind of drill it down to writer, because it all kind of stems from the writing and the sort of the creative blueprint. So I go with writer, even though there's a whole multi-hyphenates behind it.
But people will know you from making movies.
Yeah, some people, the good people.
The good people do.
Yes, yeah.
And then people like me who know you from Crazy Monkey and your MTV videos.
Yeah.
But does that feel like a lifetime away?
It does in a way, but that was just sort of one of the projects. I mean, we've been working on a bunch of other projects since then and that kind of thing. So we keep going in front of camera and behind camera and on top of camera.
Do you feel a sense of dread though when somebody says, so what you doing these days?
Yes. No, not really. It's
you started with yes. Your
yeah,
gut says yes.
My gut says yes. No, but there's no real dread. It's, you know, I just direct them to like a website or, you know, go and check out brendanjack.com or, you know, go see our stuff on YouTube. There's plenty of other stuff out there constantly being made.
Kirsten, I think you have come to the rescue of freelancers, because for me one of the biggest issues is where to work. Now, as a freelancer, I work from home, which is all very well. I've got a very well-equipped study. I've got fiber. I've also got a 5-year-old and a 12-year-old, which suddenly makes that workspace not great in the afternoons. You've got the Graft Yard. Tell us about that.
Yes, David, agreed. So freelancers do need a workspace, and a lot of them, especially because they work alone, work from home. And I've also got an office. That's how I started out at home. But being on your own, even if you don't have a 5-year-old and a 12-year-old, is not always the best scenario. So we being my business partner, Claire and I, have created a co-working platform which allows freelancers to come sit their work. They've also got all the corporate facilities, the printing facilities, the internet, the Wi-Fi, the kitchen, the bathroom, the refreshments. But above all of that is a space that they can work productively in, inspiring space. We've done away with the white walls, the standard furniture. There's different setups because, let's face it, different freelancers work differently. And sometimes a dining room table or a standard desk in white, you know, in 4 white walls is not the best, most productive space that they can work in. So we've got casual areas, kitchen counter, church benches with little school type style desks to work from. Spacious, semi-private offices, and access to boardrooms. Freelancing is great until you have a meeting with someone to make a big deal at, and then having a 5-year-old and a 12-year-old is a problem.
Well, that's a big problem for me. Where should we meet? Well, it tends to be coffee shops and things like that, or whoever has got the premises. Otherwise, you're tripping over the Labrador, and it's never a good way to work, is it?
Yes.
It doesn't have a professional feel to it when you're inviting people into your house. But Ishay, I'm going to bring you in now, streaming, coming in on via the internet. I hope this all works out well for us. But you've had an interesting career path because, like me, you were a lawyer at one stage and you abandoned that to go freelancing. Take us through that career path.
Well, hi, David, and hi, Brendan and Kirsten. Well, I guess it was either this or becoming a comedian. And not because I'm particularly funny, but a lot of lawyers, I think, either become writers or something in the media, or I hear comedians. It wasn't an easy decision, and definitely is not something that happens overnight. In my case, it stemmed from a sabbatical. I'd been working for, nonstop for so many years, just studying through. I actually started in medicine. and moved over into law. I did a master's, and I'd never seen anything of the world. I'd never experienced much more than that. And it started with a little break that I took for myself. And I didn't necessarily abandon it because I hated it. I actually missed the pressure greatly. And I missed it for a long time. But I've used that impetus, I guess, in this career that I found myself in. I've always been writing. And I guess back when I was 18, it wasn't an option to go off to study journalism, because what would you do? Work at the Natal Witness in Pietermaritzburg. But having said that, I think it's definitely become more acceptable to follow a passion. And I find myself in the company of a lot more freelancers and people who have taken alternative paths to get to the careers that they're in now, as opposed to 10 years ago, where it was really just the solid, if you were capable, you were either you were arty or you were in sciences, for example, and you were expected to follow certain paths. And that's really how I found myself. But just to give you a little more detail, it was in 2010 when I started a blog that became the platform for me to give myself permission, really, to start writing for formal publications.
Was it a leap of faith? Because if you're in a legal career, there's, well, I know it works on billable hours, but there's comfort, there's security in that line of work. Now suddenly you're saying, well, I'm going to now pursue something that might appear to be quite frivolous. You're not sure of a constant stream of income, whereas with law you are. How much of a leap of faith was it? How brave a decision do you think it was when you look back at that decision to go freelance?
You know, when in retrospect, it almost feels like it was natural. But if I had to look back, there was a certain amount of agony involved. And to this day, when people ask me, colleagues or people I studied with, explain the decision. I mean, I've had conversations that just go on and on via email where they really don't understand. They want me to explain why, and why would you leave? And I was really at a very high-powered firm. It's difficult to get a position in there. I worked really, really hard. I remember those self-funded trips during my master's going around for interviews. And it's, pretty much like hen's teeth. 5 people get in, hundreds and hundreds will apply. So it was I understand the questions and I understand the concerns people have. And yes, it did take a great leap of faith. But sometimes I guess you get to a certain point where things feel natural and right for you, and you have to heed them. You have to follow. And I did, and I allowed myself that opportunity, and that but it definitely was not an easy choice.
Now that you've experienced the freedoms, the flexibility that freelancing offers, you've experienced the highs and lows, do you ever think you would go back to a legal career?
Well, it wasn't necessarily the legal, that I left because it was legal. I didn't enjoy the work. I did enjoy the work. But what I find is that similar pressure that I missed when I left, I found a way to channel it with chasing crazy deadlines. And so, I find myself applying myself in a similar manner in the type of research that I do. Sure, a lot of the work is travel and food. It sounds frivolous, but they are really deeper stories, and those are the stories I want to cover. And I think that particular background that involves incredible amounts of research, that involves digging for a solution, looking at the hook or the angle that maybe not everybody's looking at. I apply myself in that way. I'm sorry, I think I may have veered off the question, but I hope that answers some of it.
Well, it certainly was a full answer. We could there are a lot of takeaways from that. I'm going to come back to you, Ishay. I want to find out about some of the pitfalls and see if people who are considering the life of a freelancer or who have embarked on the life of a freelancer, if there's anything that they can learn from your own experience. But Brendan, for you were working for an advertising agency. So you too had, am I right, fixed income, fixed employment, and then had to go, let me take the leap and go and pursue a dream which would involve freelancing. Is that the way it worked for you?
Yeah, I actually was originally going to be doing clinical psychology and realized I didn't want to hear anyone's problems like all day. Even my friends, I was like, okay, I can't listen to your problems. I'm not going to do this professionally. And I went into advertising. Maybe that's just sort of a sort of side of the freelancing thing is maybe you don't know what you want to do, and you kind of can figure your way out like that. From like a very late age, I still wasn't sure what exactly I want to do, and to a degree I still don't. I'm kind of still changing. But I was in advertising for 7 years at Jupiter Drawing Room, which is a very well-established advertising agency. A lot of fun, and it was almost, I learned what I had to there, and I wanted to diversify what I do with my day. I wanted to, kind of be the master of my own time in a way, and not have to apply for leave anymore. As a freelancer, you generally get the leave that you apply for, because you're
Yes, I apply in my head for my leave. I do it all the time.
Once or twice, I'm like, no, you're not going on leave.
I'm just going to give myself the day off tomorrow.
Yeah,
I've done that.
Approved.
It's done.
So yes, yes, there is a sort of downside of not having a fixed income anymore, and that you're needing to kind of hustle a little bit harder. There are some sort of iffy times that you would go through, especially when you're starting out. But for me, it's way more satisfying to kind of be able to have a diverse experience and do different things, and not sort of according to a company.
Did you set up the things that you wanted to do before you cut the ties with the ad agency, or did you just throw yourself into the abyss?
I was a younger man, originally from Crazy Monkey, so we had the Crazy Monkey mindset.
Were you doing Crazy Monkey at the same time as ad agency?
In fact, that's kind of what spurred it on. We came up with the Crazy Monkey concept while we were in advertising. It was originally going to be an advertising campaign. And we went, no, well, let's just go for gold and try and get this on TV. And through circumstance, it got onto MTV worldwide. But that kind of led to the opportunities to make movies and kind of sketch comedy and that kind of thing, and TV pilots and that kind of thing. So yeah, it took us from there, and it was a bit of a leap of faith. And there was no like, this is my to-do list and this is my 5-year plan. It was, okay, I'm doing this, and let's see what happens. Now,
for you, Kirsten, you're engaging with freelancers all the time, but let me just find out from your own personal circumstances. You were the MD of at Order Processing Systems. What was that? Software development?
Yes, we're a software development company, and we specialised in customised software for major corporates, mainly on the procurement side. So a lot of it was solutions orientated for big corporates. I think with the technology that we have today, it was a very big surprise to find out how many corporates still use a lot of manual processes. And so the deeper I got into the problems, the more passionate I became about the solutions. And I think that's even what it was, a huge stepping stone into leading into something like the Graft Yard for freelancers. I started out as a freelancer, accounting when I was 20, and worked on my own, had to get my own clients. So I've been down that journey. And then I came to the software company with my father. This was a family business. And 2 years ago, we wanted to take the company into different directions, and he was the founder, so I kind of took a back seat. And because of the passion I had for solutions and helping find kind of solutions for smaller, intimate, detailed problems, helping startups and freelancers and providing platforms and networks for that became like almost a natural, and it almost feels similar to what Ishay was talking about. There is kind of, it just becomes a natural progression, I think, from where you stem from, if that's somewhere where you're going to go. So yeah, landed up from software into the Graft Yard.
Do you think the Graft Yard success is because you appreciate what freelancers are going through? You've been there and you understand the problems they face.
100%. So I don't think anyone is ever too small to start something. And what I find that we enjoy catering for is freelancers, because it's single people usually that start out, or groups of 2 or 3. Consultants, small entrepreneurs, startups, home businesses. So we create a platform where you can come and feel like you're part of something. I think that's one of the biggest losses when you do move away from a corporate. The biggest thing I find hard was missing out on the Christmas year-end functions.
For me, it was the great bonus that I never had to do that ever again.
Oh no, I absolutely loved it, and the team events and getting to know people. Ironically, though, I was always in the accounts department or IT, so I was always in an isolated office anyway, but I think there was always that, just outside there was this big network of people, and when I left there was just no ways I could tap into that. And a place like the Graft Yard, you walk in, it's familiar faces, so there's no red tape, there isn't the stiff corporate environment, but there are familiar faces. It becomes a community, you start networking with other people, and it's just, it becomes a family there without you having to worry about yes or no sir.
And I'm sure that that is one of the great bonuses. I can think of having a secure place to work and all the trappings that come with that, but it's the other people. If I'm sitting in my study, it's the Labrador and the 2 children. That's not great networking for me, quite frankly.
Won't get you
And,
far.
and you're getting that networking through the Graft Yard. We'll continue pursuing that angle. Ishay, let's talk about when you decided to go freelance. The question I asked Brendan as well, had you set up, did you know exactly what you wanted to do before you leapt into the void and went for this world of freelancing?
I wish I could say I was a little more organized than I was. One thing I did do, though, I mean, you've got to be practical. And I think even creative people, we hate that word. You know, it's intimidating. It puts you in a box and makes you maybe shiver a little bit. But I did have some savings that I kept aside. And I think it's really difficult if you're going to launch, particularly, I mean, we understand the South African, if you're writing for local publications, it's a really, really tough way to make a living. I think the word rate has been the same for the last 10 to 15 years. That's the truth. So, you have to have something in the pocket of the kitty to keep you going. If you've got support from home, if you've got a supportive partner, this is you have to have open conversations, because at the end of the day, there are bills to pay. Again, a conversation creative people don't always like to get stuck in, but they are practical considerations. So I had that in place, but I didn't have it to sustain me for a long time. And just prior to that, I had invested in a year of my time in a business that didn't quite work out. I had to, purchase very expensive equipment. In fact, it's sitting in the back of the office, taunting me. But again, I think it's a reminder for me of the journey we take to get to where we are. And so apart from that, I was lucky, if one can use that word, because when I started the blog, it won an award, and there were lots of editors and television producers and that kind of thing wanting me to partake in different things. And it was actually from there, for writing for free for them, that I started to develop a little a basket and a little network. And that's another thing that if we speak about the practicalities of freelancing, if you don't mind me just addressing that briefly, David, you want to know how do you actually get about doing this? How do you get yourself out there? And I think it's a combination of things, particularly if you come in from the outside. I didn't come from journalism school, even though I've done several courses with renowned novelists and with online writing courses too. You don't come in with that basket of people, so you have to use the word that we like to use a lot called hustle. And you start to develop a little network, and if editors like you or like your work, they'll often ask you to take on assignments, and that's how it started. So it's a combination of that, having something to keep you going, and then being fearless. And for someone like me, that was really the big leap. I prefer to create behind a rock. I'm not the person necessarily always in the front pushing myself. So that has been really difficult, because in this writing career, you have to pitch. And pitching means being extremely vulnerable. You've got to put yourself out there. So it's a combination of those three things, and it never ends. The danger, of course, is that with this sort of freelancing, the work hours go from, I'd work till 2 in the morning when I was at the firm. That was normal. Now you work almost, you sleep 4 or 5 hours a day. But then again, you do have a sense of autonomy. It's your choice to do that. You could also take a nap at 4 if you want. That's also your choice. So it's a combination of those factors that help to keep you going and move towards any sort of success.
Before you embarked on the freelance world, because you've made this, can I call it a niche? It's a fabulous niche. You've got food and travel, but you also do, as I've been looking at the kind of things that you comment about on Twitter, for example, a lot of issues of social justice. I'd imagine that nobody clamors for that kind of material, no matter how important it actually is. The food and the travel, I'm sure, brings home the bacon. Did you isolate those areas specifically for you, or did you find, as you tried various things, that's where there was a more stable income, that is more of a direction that you wanted to follow?
That's a good question, because I think another thing that people, freelancers, could consider, because it's such a saturated market, is to think an action plan through. And I didn't. What happened was, I'd been cooking and I'd been traveling for food without realizing that this was a niche. This was something that people were interested in. And if you just look at the statistics now, I think there was a Skift report that came out a few years ago, 2 years ago, that just pinpointed the rise in culinary tourism. Now, I was doing this way before all of that, and this is obviously a trend that has developed in this period. I didn't think that through. It was just something that I was consuming. I was an eater. I was a cook, and I was traveling for these reasons. And I found these stories compelling to myself. And I think that's, if you are going to do this, if you are going to take that leap, if you're going to go from that security and position of power into this little crazy, unstable state, then you've got to do it for things you really, really want to do and really, really love. And I know it sounds like a cliche because it's tough out there. And people are struggling. I'm finding more and more that because it is so popular, because the research shows that people are traveling particularly for food. How crazy, right? We can credit Gordon Ramsay, and we can credit network TV, and we can credit our growing curiosity, and maybe even a sense of loneliness, because people, we have so many social media contact with social media, but we are actually increasingly lonely. So people do use food as a mechanism and a manner in which to connect. I see a lot of people getting into it, a lot of bloggers, because they think that this is the thing to do, because they take beautiful Instagram shots, and because that's what PR companies want. And that's one way to do it. But I think we lose an essence too. We lose an essence of the story and the people behind those dishes and the food. And that's really what I'm trying to do. So it wasn't a well thought out plan as it should have been. It was just something that I am extremely interested in. I'm just grateful that editors and people want to read those stories too.
Yeah, it sounds much the same as happened with me. I gave up a career in radio and went freelance and wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. And the work found me, and I was able to carve my own niche. But I hadn't actually sat down and I didn't write down bullet points of what I wanted to actually pursue. It all worked out for me. I don't know if we just happen to be very lucky people, or that's the way it works for freelancers. For you, Brendan, did you have a specific idea? This is my career path as a freelancer from here on in.
Yeah, I still don't have that idea.
Fantastic
worked
answer.
out. But no, I mean, it was never like I say, it was never sort of a pre-planned 5-year plan or anything like that. You kind of, I think there is probably an element of luck, and I agree, we probably have a lot of luck involved amongst all of us. But maybe if that's your passion and these are your talents, that kind of steers you in the direction you want to go, and it is that passion to do what you do that keeps you going, that will sort of hopefully lead you to success.
Now, Ishay made an interesting point. I'm going to get her to comment on this, Ishay. So listen up, you're getting this question next. She mentioned that she had been involved in a project that hadn't really worked, and the equipment is behind her. I don't know if it's the globe behind her. We'll find out. It's a very nice looking globe.
I'd like to buy it if she's...
Yeah, no, I want it for my kids.
All right, we'll see.
To get a true reflection of what the world looks like. But I had a lot of hit and miss. I had some wonderful ideas. I was going to revolutionize the world of podcasting. I was going to make the most fabulous corporate videos. I found all the people who wanted to do it. Nothing ever came of it. Right. But there was a lot of stuff that I was going to try, and it never happened. But I never allowed that to defeat me, because there were always other things to try. And in the end, I realized that the things I thought were going to work were surefire hits, but just the stupidest ideas ever. Did you have a similar experience?
Once again, on a daily basis. Yeah, look, I've got hard drives full of ideas that I thought could go somewhere, or concepts that I thought could make good movies or TV shows or sort of business ideas. And you've got to decide, you've got this finite number of hours in the day, you've got to decide, look, do I really want to commit to this and keep doing this over and over? Is there sort of an end result? The same with the podcast. I did a podcast for a number of years when it first was bubbling up. And it's great, and I love podcasting and whatnot, but maybe the time wasn't right. There weren't enough people online, especially in South Africa. The platforms weren't right. So, yeah, it's time, place, and what do you want to spend your time on doing?
But I think the important thing is that you shouldn't be, as a freelancer, be afraid to think of the good ideas, try and pursue them, and if they don't work, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Things are going to crash and burn around you, and you just can't be disheartened
You
about
might
it.
find that globe is going to come into play at some other point in time. You go, oh, hang on, that ties together with this. So, keep it on in the background, keep thinking, and it might come around to actually being valid at one point.
Yeah. Ishay, did you have that hit and miss?
Yeah, so as I explained, I did, and it was for a while. It was crushing because I had invested almost everything that I'd saved, and we had 2 launch dates, and it was only at the second one, and I had delayed a trip to London that was necessary. I needed to get up there, and at the second launch date, the developer sat down and confessed that he just couldn't deliver, and all the things that he was promising, they just were. So it was difficult, but I think when you look at it, just like you asked, why I left law. When I look at it, and I'm not necessarily a constant optimist. I am cautious and slightly skeptical too. But I think all those little pieces add up to the place you are right now. I know that sounds like a Hallmark card, but it really does. Would I be able to analyze and read pieces of information that in front of me the way I do without that training? No. Would I have patience when I sit with somebody and I'm interviewing them and they explain a few things to me about, this didn't work out? Would I look at them and say, well, you could have done better? No. I think it's also helped me to develop a deeper sense of compassion. And because the stories that I write about essentially they're about places, yes, but they're about the people. All these little pieces, these I wouldn't call them failures. I would call them these detours and adventures that we've had in our own careers to get us here. I mean, have helped, I think, at the end of the day, and they reflect in the work that we do. And I think with people who are freelancers, in my experience, my friends and colleagues are very creative. We've got, like Brendan says, 100 ideas up here. How do you channel them? And how do you harness the little bit of time you have? You've got to make choices. And sometimes the things you end up working on, them to a certain point and actually should have been focusing on idea B. But you can't live life just, constantly thinking about, I should have done this, and beat yourself up and then go into a spiral. You need to get up, you need to bounce, and you need to keep going. And I think writers face this on a daily basis, because if you've, and perhaps producers and people in other media too, if you've ever had to pitch an idea, then you know that you are facing the 50%, let's make it more like 70% chance of rejection every single time. So you've got to get up every single time. You've got to have a plan B, and you have to be positive. And that's the only way I think one can move forward with this particular career. You don't have a boss coming in with a stack of documents and a brief ready for you, or a set list of clients that have tied in, with a contract for X amount of years or months, whatever it is. You are going out there fresh, putting yourself out there every day, every minute, and you've got to bounce back.
What is the globe? Why do you have a globe behind you?
Well, I have one in front of me too, and I have a world map, sort of more wallpaper in the front of the office. So I'm not going to take you on a tour, but I think it just ties in with the decor here, apple green, and we have a little joke here sometimes. Let's spin the globe. Where are we going next? Because people ask, how do you choose your destination that you're going to write about? And I'm not always sent on assignment. I'm pretty much, I'm an independent traveler mostly. So, spin the globe and pick a place. Could I have said that 5, 6, 10 years ago? No.
No, that sounds incredibly glamorous, as long as your finger doesn't hit South Sudan, not right now. But Kirsten, is any of this ringing a bell from your experience interacting with freelancers?
Yeah, 100%. I think also the hits and misses help with the momentum of finding where you actually need to be or want to be or land up being. I come from accounting background, software development, and in some strange, weird part in my life, I opened up a Photoshop. I'm not a designer or a photographer by any means, and it's still there and running. But the things that I learned from all of those different industries, what I've been able to pour now into the Graft Yard and offer to different freelancers is beyond amazing. There is so much to learn, and all the mistakes become lessons. I don't think you ever lose anything in life. You win from it or you learn from it. And for freelancers, making those mistakes just helps you get more accurate to where you want to be. You become fearless in something working and then not working.
Yeah.
And you eventually land up, I really do, especially for freelancers who are brave enough to take their journey, land up where they need to be with all those mistakes lined up behind them.
Now, Brendan, you and Ishay both used this word. Well, you both used the word hustling, and she used the word pitching for business. Tell me about your take on getting the work, hustling and pitching. What's that like?
Starting out is usually quite tough. You don't have a network, or you've got a minimal network. So you kind of you've got to be very motivated, self-motivated to keep going, and setting up meetings and trying to get the gigs. And often it's for lower budgets to kind of prove yourself at the beginning, which is fine. But then eventually at a certain point, you've kind of got to bite the bullet and say, look, we're not going to do that for X.
Yeah.
Because that's just an insult. So yeah, it's a if you're not working for a company, working for yourself, you've obviously got to constantly have pipeline being set up. It's not my most fun side of things, because obviously, I mean, it sounds like we're all kind of working in a kind of creative space, which is more our mindset, not so much sales and that kind of thing. But that comes the freelancer. You've got to become a little bit more multi-hatted, if there is such a word. And
There is now, and I know exactly what it means.
Multi-hatted. You need a bigger cupboard to fit all your hats. And yeah, you just got to, make sure that you can keep building that pipeline up.
But I do like the issue you've raised, that there are times where you say no to a job. It's a source of revenue, but it's too little for what you are able to do. I'd imagine you get to a stage of your career where you say, listen, I've made a few movies, I've written a book, I've won awards as in the ad agency. I'm actually a well-known person. I'm a comedian. People know me. I don't do it for that money. Of course, then you don't get a booking for that day, and that's money you're not making on that day.
And
so really sometimes it takes a bit of guts to go, not doing it for that money.
Yeah, and you can burn a bridge that way, but I mean, do you really want to be committed to something that you're not going to put your sort of passion behind, and it just doesn't feel right?
Yeah. Do you find, Ishay, that's a hard job to do, to turn away work because you don't think it's viable?
I think at the start, particularly, you want to say yes to as many things as possible. And you take into account that there are so many hours in the day, but you say yes anyway. But, I reminded myself that I didn't get into this for the sake of just writing anything and doing anything and accepting any fee. So there were, after the first few months, I had to say no. And I do it. And I said no to a really a glamorous Australian publication who I've written for before recently. And I'm in the middle of a book at the moment. It's taking a lot of my time. And I felt bad to say no. But I had to say, this is the fee that I find acceptable for all that work, because I know writing those guides, there's so much of back and forth, and it is never exactly what they say it will be in terms of time spent. And I said no, but I know someone else will gratefully accept the opportunity. And what I do when I can't take on a job, but I know of friends and colleagues who will and who want or need to get themselves out there, I always recommend. And I do the same for, there's hardly an event that I attend anymore, but I have a lot of colleagues who need that content to put on their sites. So I always try and connect those people together, and it works for them. But yes, I think there comes a point where you have to say, my time is worth this. It's going to take me the same amount of time and energy to do this 500-word piece. So people often say, oh, it's not 1,000 words, it's just 500 words, it's just this. But you're putting the same amount of effort because your name is attached to it. You've got to say no. You have to, and it's tough because it's a risk. You think to yourself, well, will something else come in there? Will they ever ask me to anything again? Will I be invited to something? And you have to trust that, yes, you will.
Absolutely. I know it does require a little bit of a leap of faith, but it does actually work out that way. How many times have people said to you, we'd like you to do this job, we can't pay you, but it's good exposure?
Oh my goodness, I think there how many memes have been created about this. I mean, this is a freelance nightmare. I belong to a few writers communities on Facebook, and they're constantly discussing this, the subject of exposure. And you know, the common thing is, what does exposure pay my bills? Does exposure take me on a fancy date? You know, it's ludicrous, and it is insulting. And you know, oftentimes the writers will say, well, would you ever say that to a photographer? And funnily enough, I know people who ask photographers. I have friends who are photographers, and they ask them to do this for free. And I think what makes it particularly difficult is there are so many people trying to get out there who will do it for free. And I don't begrudge them that, because we've all been there at a certain point. But it does make it very, very difficult for the rest of the industry when somebody can get something for free and they're not particularly interested in curating the quality, as long as they can get something that's of a good standard. They would rather get the good standard for free than the excellent quality and pay for it. And that puts a lot of us in a difficult position, because you do lose out on a lot of work. But my stance overall is extremely insulting when someone asks for you to do. And at the end of the day, I mean, you need to also ask the editor, will you get a salary after all of this? Will you get paid? Will you get nothing? And you know the answer. We all know the answer to that.
I think you can be very strategic. There might be something that'll open channels for you, other avenues, by doing a job for free. In my personal experience, it's never actually happened. Which brings me to probably the most critical question of the lot when it comes to being a freelancer, and that is making a living out of this, monetizing the jobs. And Brendan, how do you, when you look at all the things you do, how do you put a value to it and say, well, I'm going to charge you this amount of money for that job? How do you do that?
Well, you kind of work to industry standard. What does help being a freelancer is less overhead. So you can come in a little bit sort of more competitively, hopefully. And you know, if you've worked your niche correctly and you are good at what you do theoretically, you should be able to charge a proper rate for it. I mean, obviously, you know, if you're a Hollywood A-lister, you're going to charge a ridiculous, exorbitant amount. So you kind of try and tend towards market-related amounts, but don't be afraid to. Once you've set up your network and you've proved that you can deliver, don't be afraid to charge for it.
Yes, certainly. But I find it difficult, because I will say, okay, my background is radio and television, and then I look to see how much other radio and TV people are charging. And I know I can't get away with the exorbitant amount of money that some people are charging to MC a function.
Right.
I think I'd just get enormously embarrassed that to ask for that amount of money. So I'm always coming at a low base, but I think that's really value for money in my world. I probably, well, my wife tells me I undersell myself all the time, but I feel comfortable like that.
Well, I could sell you for you and then just take whatever that little gap is.
Yeah, you take the...
we could discuss.
What, you take the 80%, I keep the 20%. I think that's the way it works.
I think it sounds about right.
David,
you're nodding
just to
there.
jump in, I think finding and also given the different industries that I've been in, it is really hard because you have to place a value on yourself and your work. And there are not a lot of high self-worth individuals when you're starting out to do that. But I think you do get to a point where you know what your value is. So, you know, you can start out at 10 Rand for something and you're comfortable with that, and you do increase and people buy it and take and you increase it. And as long as you are increasing, at some point, the more confident you get, the more experience you get, the more work you do, that you're never platforming at a certain level. Because even, I think a lot of individuals, especially freelancers, people outside the close circle believe in them more than they do. And I think if you do throw a bite out there or throw a rod out there and something bites on an increased level, then you know where you can play. And it doesn't have to be from here to here.
Yes.
But that slight stepping, you know, when I hear what people charge or what people are willing to work for, it almost breaks my heart because I'm so passionate about it with freelancers. When you know the quality of their work and, you know, I start promoting and start pushing and stuff and they slowly step up. But you do need to have the confidence to step up and be comfortable, but keep increasing that because I think you valued a lot more than what you believe in yourself.
Yeah, I just find it so difficult to actually fix a sum of money when I hear some people will charge 50,000 Rand for a tweet. So I just can't, that sounds exploitative to me.
And it is, and absolutely. Then that you never get to that level, but you don't have to charge 50 cents for a tweet.
And the other thing is, I'm not going to compromise myself and tweet because I'm being paid to tweet. I think that would be another kind of ethical thing that I have for myself. But for you, Ishay, how difficult is it to attach value to the work you're doing? How difficult is it for you to say, I'm going to charge you X amount of money?
Yeah, no, this is quite it's quite tricky, and I can always understand, David, why people said back in school they didn't really encourage you to become a journalist or a writer, and because now when you look at the rates, I'm reminded by friends who are lawyers now that is that what you make for an article? You know, that's a pro forma contract that I can generate in 3 seconds. Are you aware of that? And I'm like, yes, I'm aware of that. But they are also the same people who ask me or fantasize and romanticize for what they think, you know, my career and life entails. So there are two sides to that. But back to value, I work with other creatives who charge, you know, incredible amounts of money, and obviously they deserve it. But I think it's the writers in particular who will remain cheerful but poor, and it's just it's tough. It is tough to put a value. There are rates, of course, that are set. Like Safria does set a minimum rate per word for local publications. It is very low, and there are still publications who pay much less than that, and they know it. They know what the minimum rate should be, but they don't. And these are big national newspapers and magazines. I'm not going to out them, but this is the way it is. So it's a case of perhaps maybe doing a larger project or more consistent work to make it make sense for you. But I'm not in a position with regard to that kind of writing where I can say, I won't do it for less than this. You can always ask, I believe. You should ask, that is there a little wiggle room in the budget? And there are times I've done that because people sometimes don't want to pay for photographs. And yet they will pay a photographer X amount per day or half day. But for the writers, they want photographs for free. So I try now to work with publications who pay fairly, because I do take photographs too. And some people think it's suitable for print. And so I try to balance it in that way, where sure, the word rate is what it is. But when you add up what you can get with a set of photographs, if they're using your photographs, then it makes that entire piece a little more worthwhile.
Well, I find once I've worked out, negotiated the rate, do the work, then it's getting paid. And for me, that's the single biggest problem about being a freelancer, is getting paid. And corporates will say, yeah, but we're on a 60-day cycle. Yeah, I'm not. I've given you the work, pay me now.
Yeah, it doesn't work for freelancers. And what I have found is that corporates are starting to get more to a point where there is a deposit. And I think as a freelancer, you have the right to be quite firm on that. It doesn't have to be 50%, 80%, but 30%, and you know what, then maybe you can make a plan for a 30 or 60 day, but I don't think it should ever go beyond 30, and that's coming from working with corporates as a non-freelancer and as a freelancer right in the beginning. But yeah, I think it has to be something firm on, because getting paid 60 days.
Yeah, I think 30 days is
single.
That should be the absolute maximum, but I find that I'm constantly after 30 days having to give a reminder. The money then arrives the next day. But do you actually have to hustle people to get paid, Brendan?
At 180 days, I have to put my foot down. I'm
That's
afraid
outrageous.
to say. No, but look, I also find, not saying any names, but the kind of bigger companies in that are a little bit sort of...
They're the worst.
Yeah, they're more
The bigger
likely.
you are, the more difficult it is to get money out of it.
They don't. So yes, you've got to be firm, and you've got to, it comes back to that, are you a salesperson, are you creative, or whatever. Sometimes you do have to kind of huck people a little bit and kind of mail them on a daily basis until they, the least path of resistance is to pay you and shut you up. But it's owed to you. So, it's kind of a bit of rude sometimes, and they do take advantage, and that is one of the sort of things that you have to kind of oversee as a freelancer. But yeah, it is an issue.
Are you good at keeping your finances in check, doing your invoices on time, following up your invoices? Can you do that bureaucracy?
Yeah, I mean, I outsource a little bit on that, but I do generally oversee it myself and do it myself. So yeah, not too bad, but it is a bit of a schlep to kind of have to do it yourself when you're trying to focus on the creative side or the work related side. So yeah, it sometimes does help to outsource a little bit on that.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea, Kirsten. For me, I learned very quickly that I had to keep a tighter rein on my own invoicing and following up on invoices.
Absolutely, and the corporates do fall in line with that. I think you teach people how to treat you, and that goes personally, friends, business, payments, work value, appreciate anything. It really is like that, and it shouldn't be a big thing. The corporates have got the money, and gaining the 6% interest for 60 days on your little account is not worth understanding their situation at all. It really isn't. They can pay freelancers, and there's too many freelancers and small businesses and entrepreneurs out there that form such a big foundation and part of the community and South Africa and the economy. They should be treated as fairly and on the same standard as anyone else. They should not be taken advantage of, because without them, there would be a huge chunk missing, and rates would be higher, payments would drop, the value wouldn't be there. Freelancers are so passionate about what they do. That's why they're freelancing. They don't want the red tape, they don't want the stiff corporate, and they want to get paid for something they love doing. And Ishay, it's, yes, it is a cliche, do something that you love, but if you're not, rather be miserable in a supposedly security company and get paid every month than be miserable trying to do something on your own.
Yeah,
That's pointless.
It can be a very lonely world. Ishay, for you, is getting the money out of the people that you've done the job for much of a problem?
I empathize with everything that has been said, because I think this is a constant that we all share. It's not easy. I've had to wait 6 months sometimes, and not just waiting and following up. But because I know this is not something that's unique to me, there are so many writers around the world. I said I do belong to a community where we share ideas and we try to assist each other. I think one of the things to do is to either use an invoicing system that sends a prompt for you so you're not the bad guy, or to have someone else in the office doing this for you. And that, because I find that particular following up on the money issue for me particularly is crushing. We've got to evaluate what our strengths and weaknesses are. And I prefer to keep the energy to the creative side. Like Brendan, I outsource that little bit and have someone follow up. And but yes, I've been in that position where, and remember as well, we work in 3-month cycles, meaning 3 months looking into the future. So I submit something today, and it will appear, I get paid on publication in most cases, and that's 3 months from now. So I've got to keep that in mind when I'm working, that I'm always working with a hope, and I'm always working with payment that's sometime in the future. And so that's how the cycle runs on my side. And that's something I've got to take into account.
Ishay, time is up. Before we let you go, give us your Twitter handles, where we find you, where we see your writing.
Okay, so you can find the writing lives on the website www.foodandthefabulous.com. You can find me at my own name, at Ishay Govender, and that's where, as David said, you'll find a lot more of the social justice tweets and stuff that's going on in the world, things I'm curious about. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck to all the freelancers. It's really a path worth pursuing, but it takes a lot of perseverance, and you need to be organized, and you need to keep positive.
I think you've given us quite a lot of insights there, Ishay. Thank you very much. Kirsten, I know you wanted to say something before we get your Graft Yard information.
Yes, just for freelancing as well, just on I think freelancers, and Brendan touched on it, you're actually wearing all the different hats. You need to become competent in areas that you're not comfortable in. And a lot of freelancers might not necessarily be able to outsource what they're not good at right in the beginning. Having the Graft Yard as a platform is great. We offer those services, and obviously at ridiculous rates, because we are there to encourage freelancers and help them grow. But become competent. So you can't send an invoice out 30 days late and then expect immediate payment. Make sure all those basics are covered up front, especially when it comes to the money.
Okay, and where do we find the Graft Yard, information about the Graft Yard?
So Graft Yard is situated at Blackheath, Heathway Centre. We've conveniently situated ourselves in a shopping centre because we have discounts and value adds with all our tenants around there, security secured parking, and lots of other benefits that go with that. But the website, graftyard.com, and our Instagram and Twitter, the Graft Yard as well.
As simple as that.
As simple as that.
And BrendanJack.com.
BrendanJack.com, at BrendanJack on Twitter.
Are you a prolific tweeter?
Not too much. I find it kind of can drain time. I like to pop on a little bit and then off.
You're
I
more
go.
a voyeur, are you?
Yeah, well, yeah, a news voyeur. Yeah, I don't know what that is. But yeah, my book's on Amazon, the How to Succeed with Nothing But Passion in a Wealthy Family. We could save that for another episode perhaps. And yeah, Hammerhead TV, a bunch of sketch comedy on that as well. So
Empire, How to Succeed with Nothing But Passion, Great Ideas, and a Wealthy Family.
Correct.
Now that's not, is it semi-autobiographical?
It's kind of a bit of everything. It's fictionalized story of a sort of trust fund kid. There's some real stories from like when I was in advertising and marketing. So, and also it comes from reading a lot of biographies and autobiographies at the time, as well as sort of business science books and that kind of thing. So I kind of meshed it all together as a sort of creative outlet, and it's almost a satirical how-to book in a way. But having said that, the people who have read it, a lot of them come back to me and say, there's actually some really good ideas in there, even though it's meant to be kind of over the top and whatnot, and sort of from a comedic perspective. So, yeah.
So you can order that through your website, go to Amazon?
Amazon, yeah, on my website, it's an ebook at the moment, yeah.
Okay, it's the way to go, self-publishing as well.
Yes.
BrendanJack.com and Twitter as well, BrendanJack.com.
Yeah, or
at BrendanJack.
Or just come say hi in the street.
That easy as that as well.
Always.
And that wraps up this Iris session on the Change Exchange, brought to you by BrightRock. I hope for all the freelancers, you got some ideas out there. I've got to say, it's a wonderful world. Once you're out there, it does take a leap of faith. It can be quite a frightening place. The money might sometimes be slow, but at the end of the day, I cannot find better job satisfaction than I have as a freelancer, and I hope the reality is the same for you. From me, David O'Sullivan, until the next time, goodbye.